Quite powerful, wasn't that? These are human lives, and they're not numbers. And each of these lives have a parent, have a child, have a spouse. And every time, as they said in the film, each day they say, well, I'll try again tomorrow. And then they chase the high, they chase their past behaviors, and we are all here to say, how do we continue to give them the hope and the courage and the ability to overcome those struggles that they have. Now, before I invite our panel up here, I do want to take a moment, because at the end of the panel we'll all be going outside and talking about the film and the panel and having some cocktails and some food. But I want to take a moment first to thank a few other people who are in the room tonight. First of all, I want to thank our board of directors, many of whom are in the room. Someone asked me earlier when we were waiting to come in, why the San Diego Foundation and the Center for Civic Engagement hosts events like this. And we host these events, and the board supports us hosting events like this, because we recognize that these community conversations are important, and that we all want to learn more about those challenges that we face as a community. And I just want to thank those of you who are here with us tonight. So to our board of directors, thank you. I'd like to introduce Dana Littlefield. Dana is a reporter for the San Diego Union-Tribune, and she has more than 14 years of experience reporting on recidivism, the criminal justice system, and she is going to be our moderator for tonight's event. Dana, come on up.
Yes, hi. I tend to be loud. I don't want to be too loud in the microphone. Well, welcome everyone to this event. By way of applause, what'd you think of this movie? Did you learn something from it? Okay. It's very interesting, and I know our esteemed panel here, they're very aware of these issues. They work with these issues every day. It is my hope that I know that there are some public safety involved people here in the room, professionals who deal with these issues, but it's my hope that there are a few of you out there who maybe are learning a little something from what you've seen on screen, and will learn even more from our panel that's gathered here today to talk to you about these issues. So I thank you for coming and welcome. I'm going to go ahead and get to it then. So I will introduce our panelists. In no particular order, I have on my list here, I'd like to introduce to you all Mack Jenkins, who is Senior Policy Advisor for the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Mr. Jenkins, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And next, I have Peter Callstrom, CEO of San Diego Workforce Partnership. Thank you and welcome. And also Robert Smith, whom you saw earlier tonight, and he is San Diego County Director for the Center of Employment Opportunities. So welcome once again, Mr. Smith. Thank you. So, boy, there's a lot to unpack from that film we all just witnessed. That's now the second time I've watched it, and this second time around I picked up on a few details that I hadn't noticed the first time around, so I'm happy to have seen it a second time. And as was mentioned when I was introduced, yes, I was a reporter for the Union-Tribune for many years. Most of the time that I've been there, I did cover the state court system. I'm now an editor at the Union-Tribune. I now oversee a team of reporters who cover public safety issues. I'm the public safety editor. But during my time as a reporter, I was sitting in courtrooms most days, and I noticed that, often those of us covering those issues, it seemed as though the story ended, for us at least, it ended at sentencing. Or maybe it ended at a hearing sometime later. Every now and then we'd pick up a parole hearing and write about that if it was particularly newsworthy. But as these gentlemen know, and I know, the story by no means ends right there in that courtroom. And so during my time, my 14 years covering state courts, I became very interested in issues related to reentry because I wanted to take a look at, as others have done, I wanted to take a look at what happens afterward. What happens after that sentencing, what happens after the prison stint, what happens after the jail stint. And it's only because of my access to experts like these gentlemen here that I was able to tell those stories at least somewhat effectively. So let's go ahead and hear from them now. This film that we just watched talked specifically about the issue of recidivism. And so, gentlemen, I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about that word. That's not a word that, I said this earlier tonight, that's not a word that gets thrown around when you go out for a cup of coffee with your friends and you're talking about issues, at least not my friends, maybe your friends, I don't know. but recidivism is a bit of a tricky word, and it seems to me, at least in the time that I've been covering these issues, that the definition or how it's defined is a little hard to nail down. So I wonder if one or more of you could speak to that issue, what it is and how it's measured.
I want to.
Okay, I kind of figured.
Yeah, I want to for a lot of reasons. And before I share some of my comments, I'll give a little bit more about my background. Ms. Littlefield knows, and some of you in the audience know, before I was a policy advisor with the Council of State Government's Justice Center, I was the chief probation officer here in San Diego County. And before I was in San Diego County, I worked in Orange County, overseeing probation services. I've spent 40 years in the criminal justice system, all in the community corrections field. So dealing with recidivism has been my business and continues to be now on a national level. So to your question, I can tell you that the definition of recidivism is something that criminal justice experts all over the country, let alone San Diego County, have not only discussed but argued about. I was past president of the Chief Probation Officers Association, and then while I was there, the chief probation officers in California decided to take on the term of defining recidivism, and there are 58 chiefs around the state, and we had a knockdown, drag-out fight over just that term. But what I found in my career and in the work that I'm doing right now, in terms of trying to get a sense of what is recidivism, as a definition, what I use is return to crime. But when we're talking about reducing recidivism, what we're really talking about is changing behavior. Because what happens with individuals that come into the justice system, a lot of people come into the justice system once and they never come back. But what our concern about, and what the film did a great job talking about, is those individuals that come into the justice system and for whatever reason can't get out. So when we're talking about trying to look at and trying to reduce recidivism, as it were, what we are really talking about is trying to find ways to change behavior and change it in a way so that behavior stays in what we call a pro-social way. So that's part of what I wanted to throw into the discussion. There's a lot of other tangents to it in terms of how recidivism is tracked and measured, but in a nutshell, I think that's really what we always should be focusing on, is what kind of behavior are we seeing with the individuals that we want to be engaged with, that we want to help, and how can we change that behavior in a way so that they're no longer hurting other people, and they're also putting themselves in the best position to basically provide for others and enjoy their lives.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that specifically? I mean, how you define recidivism and how you measure it. I know personally I've heard a lot of varying descriptions. It's measured over 3 years. It's measured over 1 year. Is that something that you two gentlemen have to deal with in your respective occupations, how to track that? Because it would seem to me that that's one way in which you measure success, is whether that recidivism rate changes.
Well, I don't want to get into a knockdown, drag out with Mack.
Oh, please don't.
He looks like he can take me. But I mean, for us, and I agree that changing behaviors is key. And I mean, for us, we work with participants for from 1 year to 18 months out. So, but the lucky part about our partnership with the Sheriff's Department and with the probation team is that we we can always get data on where our participants are at. And for us here in San Diego, we know that we have a 22% reduction in recidivism. So that's what we're proud about.
I see. Understood.
And where we come in on this, the San Diego Workforce Partnership is more commonly known for the career centers that we fund and oversee throughout the region. About 70,000 people who are impacted by layoffs or needing to get re-skilled to get into a new career is the bulk of our work. We also do a lot of work in youth and a number of other programs to serve people with different barriers to employment. So we're relatively new to this work. A couple of years ago, about 2.5, we actually were working with Chief Jenkins and the sheriff and other partners to bid on a pilot program out of Department of Labor, 2-year pilot program in order to establish a career center in an incarceration facility. We won the grant, one of only 8 in the country, other workforce entities like us, and then we started at East Mesa Correctional Facility a little over 2 years ago, and then a year later we won the second round, and so we opened up in Las Colinas. So we now have 2 full years of service within East Mesa and a year at Las Colinas. We've had about 800 inmates, if that's the correct term for the folks in the jail, go through this program, which is a shortened version of a career center. So work on the resume, interviewing skills, dress for success, you name it, get ready for the real world once they're out. And then we partner with Second Chance Program as our funded partner currently. And so there's a full service component. So it's the sheriff, it's probation, it's us, it's Second Chance. And so we're doing all the work prep in order to get into the world of work, and then the handoff once they depart. So the early data is really promising because the average incarceration or recidivism rate, Chief, you would know better, but in the neighborhood of 60% recidivism, people who are returning. Our goal with the grant with Department of Labor was to get that down to 22%. That seemed really aspirational, but go for it. And actually after 2 years now and 800 people, the recidivism rate is about 11%. So it's working, it's really promising. Yes, we're very excited. Credit to probation, the sheriff, and Second Chance Program. But having that connection and that support network and a great collaborative team, the early results are great. Time will tell, but we're really optimistic.
Let me just add one last piece to kind of, I talked about the fight, I didn't talk about the result. So what the chiefs did decide that from a probation standpoint to measure new convictions during a term of supervision. Probation terms in this state are typically 3 years. So one of the roles of probation is to, when someone's under probation supervision, manage them in a way so that they don't commit a crime again and come back in front of the court. So the measure, as it were, was a new conviction. CDCR measured recidivism as a new incarceration. So those are 2 different things. And they track it for a period of time post-incarceration. And they track it, they will report numbers at 6 months, they will report numbers at a year, and they will report numbers after 3 years. The 60% or 70% figure, actually, I think their last figures that CDCR released was a 67% recidivism rate or return to incarceration rate for people leaving prison in California.
I see.
So that's high, and that's why the numbers that Peter just talked about is tremendous when you can see those kinds of drops.
And yes, congratulations for your successes in that program. One of the things that the film points out rather vividly are the challenges that folks face when they come out of prison, are returning to neighborhoods where they're running into people who may not have their best interests at heart. And unfortunately, as we saw in the film, some do end up returning to prison. So I wonder, since the 3 of you have dealt with these issues so closely, can you tell us a bit more? I'm going to ask you first to tell us a bit more about what those challenges are and how you begin to address those challenges for each person that you serve.
Well, with the Center for Employment Opportunities, where our focus is on employment. For us, our intervention is immediate employment. So within days of release, we actually hire individuals. They become a CEO employee. So many of the issues that you see faced around employment, we help them deal with that. Now that they're earning income, they can actually reach out to sober living. We also have partnered with Second Chance, not just employing their residents in our organization, but also referring them to sober living housing throughout the community as well. Restoring Citizens has a great home that we are partnered with now. So we're addressing those two things immediately. The changing behaviors, our structured model allows people time to readjust. They can be with us for up to 6 months working for CEO. So that really gives them a cushion to get back into society and then readjust and level out.
Okay.
Well,
Can I just ask everybody to speak right into the microphone, please? Thank
Okay.
you.
Make sure I'm doing that. I thought that the film did just a marvelous job of, the film is really rich, of really portraying real issues for a justice-involved population that is trying to reenter and come into the community. Because you could see that I really ended up focusing around 4 different personalities, and one of the gentlemen who ended up setting up the barbershop, that became his job, and it was successful with it. The others kind of dabbled with it a little bit. But I think your question was, how do you approach the kind of myriad of issues that they face?
Yes.
And I will tell you that from a probation standpoint, from a community supervision standpoint, that really is our business. It is to go through a process of assessing the individual's background and to try and get a sense of the likelihood that that they will recidivate. That's one of the things that's part of our job. And then also to take a look at what have been the factors that have led to their involvement in criminality in the first place, and then prioritizing what those are. There was a line in there. Was it Lewis? What was the name?
Louis?
Louis. He said to one of them, he said, "Don't try and do it all right now." He said, "You need to slow down, take it a step at a time." That is absolutely positively true, because it otherwise can be overwhelming for individuals depending upon all the things that they have to do. So that's one of the practices and roles of a good probation officer in a good probation department, that assesses what those needs are, prioritizes them, and then tries to link and engage in the supportive services. We developed a great relationship with CEO Robert, and knowing what the work that you guys did, so because we did know that a lot of the individuals that we were supervising had a history of unstable unemployment. So part of what I wanted to structure was that we would identify, as part of the assessment process, those folks where getting a job right away would be helpful to them as they try to re-enter. But that's not for everybody, in all candor. For some folks that have been battling with addiction, getting clean and sober is more important than getting a job. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's what we have known from just dealing with the population. So then getting them into an effective substance abuse program where they can get their addiction or abuse under control, and then in a sequenced manner get them into a situation where they can get employment. That's what we would work for. But in response to your question, it really is taking a gathering first of what's going on with the individual, and not doing things to them, but doing things with them, and try to work collectively together for a plan that the probation officer and department can then work in a case management type of a way, in a supportive, balanced approach measure to try and help them make those changes that I talked about.
Okay. How about you? What are those challenges?
Well, I guess one other issue I just want to bring up is a little separate from that, because these gentlemen know this far better than I and what we do. The great concern of ours is the school-to-prison pipeline, or the lack of school-to-prison pipeline. How do we stop this or provide more opportunities for those who are suffering now, who are young and disconnected? And another big piece of our work is around identifying this term opportunity youth. This is, in our region alone, there's some 43,000 young adults, 16 to 24, not working and not in school. It's a national crisis. 5.5 million youth in that age range, not working, not in school. Think about it, and think where they're going to go. Think what their options are if we don't get them reconnected in whatever manner, back to school, back to the workforce. So we have to get ahead of this problem as much as we have to do all we can now for those who are incarcerated. So we have to see this in a very holistic approach, or we'll be having to do the same thing again and again over time. So we have to approach this as a systemic issue, a societal issue. So we have to do more to get ahead of the problem. As the world of work is changing dramatically, and there's fewer jobs, they're harder to get, and many are going away through technology. We have to be thinking about what can we do so that people have hope, that they have jobs that are available, that there's opportunities for them. So I just wanted to highlight that issue, so it's so critical. If we don't do something different, as they mentioned in the film, we're going to get the same results.
Okay. Looks like it's just about time for us to take some questions from the audience.
Could I add one thing?
Yes, you may.
I just want to say, many people don't know this, but I want to thank Mack personally, because it was his leadership that I believe was instrumental in CEO coming to San Diego.
Thank you.
So the proclamation should have had your name
Oh,
on it.
that's kind of you. Thank you very much, Robert. You know the work that you do, so I was really happy to be a part of that.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from, ma'am? Would you, thank you. We have a question there about midway down, hand in the air.
Hi, for Robert, I'm just interested, what is the annual annual income of the men that have jobs? And the reason I say income is because I know it's probably salary and other things they get.
Yes. The average wage right now that we have is $13 an hour. That's the starting wage. And most of our folks we don't count jobs that aren't full-time placements. So, but you couple that with benefits, and then, yeah, you're talking, I think right now we're a little over $24,000 a year. So there's a lot of work to be done, because it's not a livable wage in San Diego, right?
And how many people, I just would like to piggyback on that if I may. I mean, how many employers are you working with?
I mean, hundreds of employers.
Okay.
There's this year alone, we've placed so far over 150 people into jobs, and that's probably at a minimum 100 employers. It's jobs are tough, and that's part of the reason we're here tonight. If people know people hiring, please let us know.
And that issue alone, if I may, is just so important. If anything comes from this, if you can just talk to employer friends, open your door, give a person a chance, that's our biggest limitation.
Absolutely.
And we've been fortunate in our partnerships and through the other broader work that we do that we have access to a lot of employers, but it's still hard to get the foot in the door. And the Ban the Box is going to help. But again, it just takes employers who really can see that there is a great benefit to giving a person another opportunity to prove themselves. One employer I want to call out is a company called Sheffield Platers. They were highlighted in the San Diego Business Journal a couple months ago. They've been hiring through our reentry work, and Dale Watkins, the owner of this company, has hired about 25 workers alone in his plating company, and he's promoted people. He's made it happen. When the governor came to town back in September for a reentry conference that we did with CalPIA, the California Prison Industry Association, he was honored, as were others. So we just need more employers who are willing to open the doors, give a chance, work with the support network, and that's how we're going to change this.
Absolutely echo that. And if I may, I think CEO is underutilized in the region. We have more individuals under supervision at the probation department. There's a lot more business we should be giving you, in my humble opinion.
Any other questions? Looks like there's one here up front.
I'm Malin Burnham, and I was shocked about 3 years ago when I heard for the first time that America houses 25% of the world's inmates, and we only have 5% of the world's population. So we're putting people behind bars 5 times what the rest of the world is doing on average. I said immediately, we are wrong in this country. We are wrong, and it shocked me. So I said to myself, what can I do maybe to help? And there are lots of different things that we can all do. but here's an idea that I got started. I need some help to push it, and I'll explain that in a moment. We've got 5% of the world's population and 25% of the locked up people. Now, each state in this country has its own criminal justice laws, so there's no national solution to what I'm going to propose. But we also, we have a majority of released prisoners are not prepared for normal society, jobs, and the competitive world. And it basically has to do with education, and that's where I'm going with this. So, the solution, I believe, California should take the lead and create a new national model by adding 2 components. Number 1, design an in-prison voluntary education program. Voluntary. Administered by our community college system. Why the community college system? Because we have the best in the country. We have over 130 community colleges up and down this state, which other states don't have. And so this is a great place to start. Anyway, do with the community college system, and I've already introduced this program to the local people, where its graduation certificate with these inmates would certify employability and rehabilitation. That's the man-in-the-box problem. When they get out and they sign an application for employment, have you been in jail or not in jail? You got to put an X on one of those boxes. And if you are honest, you put an X in, yes, I have been in jail, but then you now have the opportunity to show them this education certificate that you've earned from the community college system of California. And that overcomes much of the problem, if not, well, greatly much of the problem. So, also, by earning this certificate, you would earn time off for service because you're better prepared. So, and so on and so forth. The second part of my suggestion is that we institute a voluntary employment program. Previously in California, I don't know what the status is today, but our license plates were pounded out in prisons. But there's work that could be done in prisons today. So let me continue. Institute a voluntary employment program where earnings, perhaps at a reduced rate, maybe even half of minimum wage, would be placed in a trust to be released upon discharge. This would also qualify for reduced time to be served. With you board members, you have a job to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
What I'd like to say is that
Sure.
Malin, with that entrepreneurial spirit, CEO would be happy to meet with you and talk about any solutions. So I'll give you my card.
I run a women's group. It's women in reentry. It's called West Care. They're all encouraged to not go back to where they lived, which is what was said in there, to start anew. And I just thought it's a very interesting program. I believe there's 4 or 5 now programs up and down the coast of California. I don't know. I think it's just women. But they're really doing this reentry, just everything you mentioned. And it works great. The girls are terrific. Yeah.
I have been to one of those reentry facilities here in San Diego operated by West Care. I see that there are a lot of hands still up, but we are wrapping up, unfortunately, the Q&A portion of this program. But in the reception to follow, there'll be plenty of time to ask your questions and continue this discussion. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and participating in this. And please, we have a room full of people who are obviously concerned and interested in this issue. But I challenge you all to actually speak to your friends, relatives, business owners, people who are not in this room and may have something to add to this discussion, or maybe you can bring them on board. Thank you all for your time. Thank you to our panelists. Turn this back over.